He would make these wooden chairs and tables and furniture. I don't. But what I cared about was the fact that this guy was really passionate about his thing, and it was very attractive to me. Takes regular trips to Mexico and learns how to cook these dishes in the traditional way, and then talks about it with this great passion.
Let me just say this generally. Cultural appropriation is a bunch of horseshit. All the things that are good from everybody else's culture. Like, the reason people live in major cities is to go to all the different restaurants from all of the different cultures.
Yeah.
I'm so confused as to why cultural appropriation is bad. Cultural appropriation is the greatest thing that has ever happened to planet Earth.
I had to speak all the techniques in Korean. Culturally appropriate the shit out of my childhood. There's no limit.
So we are living in 1984, right? My controversial statement is, if you have to go this far to find things to be offended over, there's not that much to be offended over. If you have to go so far that you have to be offended by Trader Jose's, you got nothing going on in your life. Listen, I'm fine with, you want to take a Confederate statue and put it in a museum, fine. But like, you're talking about, we're going to fix the world by renaming Washington, D.C. because Washington was bad. There are gradations of suck.
Do you remember back when they were tearing down those Civil War statues and Trump, in all of his wisdom, was like, what are they going to do next? What about Lincoln? What about they're going to take down George Washington? And everybody's like, oh, he's so crazy. Meanwhile, that's exactly what they were doing. That was what they were doing. In Chicago, well, that was actually Christopher Columbus, who was legitimately a bad guy.
He was. I mean, yes. Yeah. Also, everyone was bad. Like, literally all the people, like enslavement, brutal treatment of people.
Right.
Fairly commonplace.
But do you think there's an argument to be said that maybe we shouldn't celebrate those bad people anymore, that we know now that we know what they really were?
Not really.
About?
I think we should just talk about the bad people. Like, right. I don't think we're the only good people in history.
Right.
I think
they should have a statue of Genghis Khan?
I don't know. What did Genghis Khan do that was good, that had good results?
Well, he opened up trade to China.
Okay, if you want to put up a trade to China statue for Genghis Khan at the Trade Federation.
10% of the population.
Yeah, true enough. And what? Impregnated the other 10% or something?
It's something wild. Everybody. He literally raped his way through Asia.
The point of a Christopher Columbus statue is not all the bad things he did to the Arawaks. The point of a Christopher Columbus statue is we are glad that Western civilization came to the Western Hemisphere. I kind of agree with that principle. I think it is a good thing that Western civilization came to the Western Hemisphere. And yes, there was a lot of brutality. And yes, there was a lot of cruelty. And we should talk about all those things. But this notion that the only cruelty that has ever existed in human history came at the behest of Western civilization, that everything was a Rousseauian paradise before Christopher Columbus came, that Christopher Columbus doesn't deserve a statue in specific, that we should, like, either make the argument that everybody was a product of their time and therefore no one deserves a statue, or recognize that when there's a statue of Christopher Columbus, we are not honoring how he treated the Arawaks. No one ever thought that we'd put up a statue to Christopher Columbus because he was really sweet to the natives on the other end of that. Right? That nobody's.
So what is the purpose of a statue? Like, when you have a Christopher Columbus statue, like, what is the purpose of that statue? We all know who he is. We all know what he did. Why do we have an enormous bronze version of him in the middle of a park?
I mean, presumably to say that Western civilization arriving here was a good thing. Well, right? Or to have the conversation. I mean, that's
it's a monument to an historical event, right?
Right. Or listen, Columbia University is named after Columbus, right? The idea of America as Columbia, right, which was an alternative name for America, was after Columbus because he was a discoverer.
Well, that's a weird one, right? We're named after Amerigo Vespucci, who nobody knows who the fuck that guy is.
Yeah, he's been lost in the time.
He's totally been lost.
But there is this idea that has settled in that and it's really of high irritation to me, that we are now the only good people who have ever lived. Everyone who came before us was just a horrible person, and we are the only good humans who have ever, like, isn't the world lucky to have us? We're the only people who have ever lived who are completely sinless, and we can look from our perch at the top of morality at everyone who came before us and say that those people were all garbage compared to us. People are a little more complex than I think we want to think of them.
Yes.
And what you also want to recognize is that the flaws of human beings are not necessarily the flaws of the system, and that just changing the system is not going to change the underlying flaws of human beings, which means you actually have to think through the policies that you're promulgating before you implement them.